Hey class, I figured just kind of to accompany what we're doing in class that I create these little videos just to kind of give you an idea of the kind of different steps and the processes we're taking to be able to write our media report. And the first thing I ask you to do after you've collated all the data on page 18 of your workbook or in your OneNote notebook was to kind of identify the similarities and differences. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to go over and take a look at a survey that I've completed and go ahead and kind of highlight all the similarities in yellow and all the differences in blue. Okay, and you just want to have a quick little kind of gauge as to where they could be. So when I look at media and duration, I think, well, we all used all three medias, but we certainly used digital media the most. I used it 56 times, and they used it 88 times, and it certainly is the highest number of hours we've used it for. Now, if I'm looking at the differences, I could also now look at the amount of time we spent on certain things. So even though I went ahead and accessed print media more than my subject, they actually accessed it for a longer duration of time, which probably means that they're probably more engaged with the actual print media. Perhaps that they're reading books at night to kind of shut off and escape and just retreat from the day, whereas maybe I'm using it for work purposes and really quickly going through it. If I go down now to my second category and I look for the similarities, well, I mean, obviously it looks like the biggest similarity is that we use our smartphones as our most dominant piece of technology. When it comes to the differences, you can see the remaining two are the differences. The smartphone is the only one we both use. I use my laptop and radio in the car, where they prefer to use their tablet to access things like Netflix and read those books at night, obviously, for a lot longer than I do. If I go down to the location, again, the similarities are pretty straightforward. I mean, we all use both three, but the majority of the time we use the technology and the media is in the workplace. Now the difference, of course, becomes in which ones we use then after that. So I could say, well, although we both use the same places, we don't use them as frequently. I use the lounge more than they do, and they use the bedroom more than I do. If I go down to engagement, I think it shows very, I mean, obviously we're engaged with each of the medias, but our fully engaged is between digital and print. The mildly is between broadcast and digital, and the somewhat engaged is only with broadcast and print. In reality, although we've looked at all three, there really isn't very many similarities here. This wouldn't be an ideal one to go to. So instead, I would probably highlight all of these and say that this is all a difference. And as a result, may not be the best category for me to pick. And the final one is the purpose. And this goes back to, again, the media needs, that uses and gratification theory. So when I look at this, it's obvious that looking at the numbers, both of us tend to use it the most for education and information. We both use it also for the other five, but then the greatest differences become, how else we use it. I tend to use a lot of it to look at news and entertainment that reflects where I'm originally from, so I watch a lot of Canadian programming. And I use that because it helps me identify with who I am. Whereas my subject here tends to use it more for escape following that. Although I have entertainment there as my second, they again have entertainment, but their social interaction is much larger than mine. So they're using social media accounts. Our entertainments have similar ideas, but you can see that identification is well and low, and I certainly don't use it as much for escape. Now the reason this step is so important is simply because now I can identify which three I think are going to provide me the most information to use when I create my report. I think one that I'm definitely going to use, I'm going to highlight again the ones I'm going to use in a slightly different color, I'm going to use media and duration. And the reason I'm going to use this is it's obvious we both use a lot of digital media. because we're both of a similar age sort, and we both grew up in similar generations, and we both use a lot of it in our day-to-day lives with our work. The difference, obviously, in the print comes from our backgrounds. So because they grew up in a different country where they didn't have access to a lot of media, for them they were surrounded with books. And so books was seen as a prized possession. Whereas I grew up around video gaming consoles, a lot of television, and there wasn't a lot to do with books in an entertainment capacity. Another one of those categories I think I would use in my report is the kind of technology we used. And again, I can talk about the rise of smartphones and the fact that they came to prominence at a time that people were being expected to use it in their workplaces. And I can also talk about the fact that, because I tend to do a lot more work and I'm a little less inclined towards the entertainment, the laptop's big for me. The radio is something I put on in the car to distract me. Whereas they fully use their tablet and their books more for their entertainment purposes or escapism. Now when I look for my final category, I need, again, similarities and differences. So I'm not going to take engagement because there's not any obvious similarities there. But I will probably go with purpose over location because I can talk a little bit more about the uses and gratification theory media needs. That even though we both tend to use it predominantly in our workplace, and that's the medium for us to work and to gain education, how else we use it to fulfill our needs drastically differs. Where escapism and social interaction is what they use their technology and their media for, where I use it more for identification and entertainment. And that's how I would start collating that data to identify the similarities and differences.